When you hear the word freedom,
What comes to mind? Is it the right to speak your mind no matter who's listening? Is it the right to own a gun? The right to choose what happens to your own body? Is it the freedom to build a business from the ground up without anybody giving you a hard time? Or to love who you love without shame or fear? For some people, freedom means fewer rules. For others, it means more protection. But here's the thing, freedom has never meant the same thing for everyone in this country. We talk about freedom like it's a shared value, this core part of being an American. But in reality, your version of freedom might look completely different than your neighbors. It might even conflict with their definition of freedom. So today we're asking the big question, what is real freedom? Not the kind that fits on a bumper sticker, gets tossed around in campaign ads, but the kind that actually shapes our lives. Because freedom in America has always been a bit of a paradox. We were founded on the idea of liberty while enslaving people. We fought for independence while still denying women the right to vote. We wrote freedom of religion into our Constitution and then tried to force everyone into one version of faith. And we're still living those contradictions. Some folks wave the banner of freedom while trying to control what women do with their bodies, or to ban books because they don't align with their belief system, or pretend that being transgender is just something that you can erase by some law or decree. Meanwhile, you got people fighting for freedom of identity, freedom of expression, freedom of love and bodily autonomy. But they also support restrictions on guns or corporate regulations that some will say infringe upon their freedoms, their version of freedom. So who's right? What counts as freedom and what doesn't? That's what we're going to dig into today. But before we dig into that, let's bring in Kate for Kate's Civic Corner.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, folks. Kate here with the Civic Corner, taking a minute to highlight some opportunities to get involved here in Southwest Washington. If you're not in this area, get on the web and look around. There are likely options around you. We'll put a link in the show notes for each of these opportunities and events where you can find more information, including what to expect and how to sign up. Coming up on May 5th at 6 p.m. is the Cowlitz County Democratic Central Committee meeting at the Kelso Senior Center. On May 6th at 10 a.m., we have the Clark County Council meeting at the Public Service Center. Both of these events can also be attended virtually. And the volunteer opportunity we're featuring this week is another ongoing one. The Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries receive volunteer support through a program called Friends of the Library. These groups are nonprofit organizations that support our libraries by fundraising, hosting programs, educating the community about the library's needs, and educating the libraries about the community's needs. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on this and the events on May 5th and 6th. If there's an event here in Southwest Washington that you'd like us to feature on Evergreen Perspective, please send us an email or put a note in the comments. This is Kate with Kate's Civic Corner, encouraging you to get out and get involved. Back to you, Ben.
All right, let's dig in. Because understanding how we define freedom and who gets to claim it isn't just a philosophical question. It's at the heart of every policy, every protest, every vote. So let's go back to the beginning. 1776, when this country was just an idea scribbled onto parchment. We were told America was founded on freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence, and it sounds beautiful. But let's be honest. It was never meant for everyone, because when the founding fathers talked about freedom, they were talking about their freedom. White, male, landowning, Christian. If you checked all of those boxes, congratulations, man, you're in the club. But if you were indigenous, your land was being stolen. If you were black, your body could be bought and sold. If you were a woman, you had no legal identity separate from your husband. And if you were poor, Forget about it. Forget about owning property or having real say in the government. The America idea of freedom was built on exclusion. And it didn't start that way by accident. That's the way it was designed, on purpose. Even the Constitution, which we all hold and revere, it's a sacred document of liberty, originally counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person. I mean, think about that. A document written to guarantee freedom was literally used to limit it. And yet, here's where the story continues to get more complicated. That same document also held seeds of something bigger, because over time, people started demanding that their freedom be recognized too. Freedom has always been this tug of war between power and progress, between who gets included and who gets left out. So as we move through history, the question shifts from what is freedom to who gets it. Because once you ask that, the story of America starts to look a whole lot different. So if the founding version of freedom was narrow and reserved for the privileged few, what happened? How did we change that? People pushed back. Freedom wasn't handed out like some party favors. It had to be demanded, fought for, bled for. And every time someone got a seat at the table, it was because they refused to be shut out. So let's start with the Civil War. Enslaved people weren't just passive bystanders waiting to be freed. They resisted. They escaped. They revolted. And when the Union finally abolished slavery with the 13th Amendment, it wasn't the end of the fight, right? The 14th Amendment promised citizenship. The 15th promised the right to vote, at least for black men. But just like that, new barriers were thrown up, right? Poll taxes, literacy tests, Jim Crow laws, lynch mobs. The ink on those amendments was barely dry before the backlash began to try to snuff out this newfound freedom. Because every time freedom expands in America, there's a reaction, a push to claw it back. If we fast forward a little bit, women organized. They marched. They got arrested. They got beaten, right? And eventually won the right to vote in 1920. Think about that. Only 100 years ago, women won the right to vote. Now the SAVE Act looks to make it more difficult for women and basically add a poll tax for everybody else. But even in 1920, that didn't mean freedom for everyone, right? Most women of color were still blocked from the ballot for decades after that. Then we had the Civil Rights Movement, Freedom Riders, sit-ins, Bloody Sunday, and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It took generations of black Americans demanding the same rights promised to white citizens at birth. And still freedom remained uneven. In more recent decades, we've seen new waves fighting for their freedom. The LGBTQ plus community fighting for the right to marry who they want to marry and serve openly in the military. Immigrant communities demanding protection and a pathway to citizenship. People with disabilities pushing for access and dignity. And each of these battles chipped away at that original exclusive version of freedom. Because that's what America keeps doing, right? We want to expanding the definition, one hard-earned inch at a time. But here's the thing. The more inclusive freedom gets, the more people it touches, the louder the opposition becomes. We're still watching it happen right now in school boards, courtrooms, in Congress, right? Which brings us to the heart of where we're at today. Because depending on your political worldview, freedom still means very different things. So, here we are in 2025, and the word freedom is everywhere, right? It's in campaign speeches, political ads, protest signs. But depending on who's holding that microphone, who's holding that sign, it can mean very different things. So let's kind of take a look at both, right? On the political right, freedom often gets framed as, freedom from government or freedom from taxes, freedoms from regulations, freedom to own guns, freedom to say whatever you want without being canceled. But at the same time, some of the loudest voices pushing for that version of freedom are also working hard to ban abortion and tell women what they can do with their bodies, even in cases of rape or when the mother's life is at risk. They're out to censor books and restrict what can be taught in classrooms. They're out to pass laws that erase the existence of transgender people. They're looking to enforce one particular religious worldview in public spaces like schools. So that starts to sound a lot like you're free to do whatever you want unless we disagree with it. That's not freedom. That's control, dressed up in some red, white, and blue jacket. If we look at the left, right, the Democrats or progressives, right, they tend to focus more on freedom of the body, freedom of identity, and opportunity. The freedom to make medical decisions without government interference telling you what you can do with your body. The freedom to marry who you love. The freedom to exist as your own authentic self in private and in public. The freedom to live in a world where billionaires don't buy up housing, hoard resources, and rig the economy. But this side, too, has its boundaries, right? The support for gun control is often seen by some as a limit on personal liberty. Environmental regulations, right? While we know aiming to protect public health can be painted as government overreach. And mandates for inclusion or fairness often clash with claims of individual or religious freedom. And speaking of religion, I want to be really clear here. I uplift and support all religions, every single one. Whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, agnostic, or you don't practice any religion at all, your right to your faith is sacred. But here's the thing. That's the key word. Your religious beliefs are your religious beliefs. That's part of the doctrine that you have chosen to live by. And no one is stopping you from practicing in that. That's why we have freedom of religion. But that doesn't mean you get to write those beliefs into law that apply to everyone else, especially people who don't share your faith. If your religion says you can't marry someone of the same sex, that's fine. I support that. Then you don't get married to someone of the same sex. But you can't limit somebody else's right. If you say you can't get an abortion because of your religion, then live by that. But someone else's life, someone else's body, that's not yours to govern. That's not freedom. That's forcing your religious doctrine onto somebody else. So let's look at a non-religious example that's of the same ilk. Let's say you don't believe in climate change. That's completely your right to do so. You think it's a hoax or it's just not your problem. That's fine. That's your view. But you still don't get to dump chemicals and toxic waste into the rivers or pollute the air for everyone else. Freedom doesn't mean the right to harm others just because you do or don't personally agree with the rules. Because in a free society, the line is clear. You get to believe what you want, but you don't get to control what someone else believes or how they live or who they are. That's not how freedom works. Because when one group starts forcing their beliefs onto everyone else, through the courts, through legislation, through cultural intimidation, that's not freedom. That's called fascism. And the truth is, it doesn't stop with religion. All right, the same mindset shows up in every part of political spectrum, where personal beliefs or profit motives are used as a license to control others. So here's the contradiction. On one side, freedom wants freedom from regulation, unless it's regulating people's bodies and thoughts. The other side, wants freedom for people and to regulate items that might be detrimental to others, like guns and environmental destruction. And that's where we are right now, standing at a crossroads, not just politically, but culturally, personally, emotionally, because this isn't just a policy debate anymore. It's about who gets to exist, who gets to live fully, and who decides what freedom actually means in a country that's more divided than ever. Right? More divided in our schools, more divided in our workplaces, more divided at holidays, group text, family text. Everybody's divided. We're living in a country where two people can say the word freedom and mean entirely opposite things. right? Where one side sees wearing a mask during a pandemic as government tyranny, while the other side sees it as basic act of care for their community, just in case it works. Where one group cheers for the don't say gay law, and others mourn what that message does to a queer kid just trying to feel safe in their own skin. This isn't about red versus blue. It's two different Americas, each believing they're fighting for liberty and believing the other side is out to destroy it. So yeah, we're more divided now than we've been in a long time, right? Not since the civil rights era. Not since Vietnam. Some would even say we've never been this divided since the Civil War. Because the cracks we're seeing today, they're not just political, they go deeper, down to what we value, what we believe government is for, and who counts as us. And that brings us to the next question. What happens when somebody's so-called freedom doesn't just clash with yours, it actively harms people? How do we untangle that? Because it's not just about ideology anymore, it's about harm and who's left paying the price. There's this idea that freedom means no rules. That if we just get the government out of the way, everything will sort itself out. But let's be honest, freedom without guardrails, that's not liberty, that's a free-for-all. And in free-for-all situations, the people with the most money, power, and privilege always win. So let's look at a few examples that I can think of. We're talking about environmental deregulation. We're told companies need the freedom to drill, mine, and frack without burdensome regulation. But what does that freedom mean for a family downstream of that operation whose water is poisoned with a runoff, right? Or the community where asthma rates are skyrocketing because a coal plant, has bypassed the emission standards. Is that freedom? Or is that one group cashing in while others pay the price with their health, with their land, and sometimes their lives? Right? What about housing? Real estate developers want a freedom to build and flip without limits, doing whatever they want. But in cities across the country, that's turned into skyrocketing rents, evictions, and entire neighborhoods hollowed out by short-term rentals and Wall Street landlords, making everyday hardworking Americans a country of renters unable to buy a home and live out the American dream. So again, whose freedom are we protecting there? Because if your right to profit means someone else loses a roof over their head, that's not freedom, that's exploitation. What about the workplace? Some folks say business owners should have the freedom to pay workers whatever they want. No sick leave, no maternity leave, no health insurance if they don't feel like offering it. But if you're a single parent who's working 2 jobs and still can't afford to take your kid to the doctor, how free are you? Really? Is that freedom? Sounds like survival to me. We're told that regulating guns is an attack on freedom. But what about the freedom of kids to feel safe in schools? The freedom to go to a concert, the grocery store, church without worrying if someone's going to open fire. There's a word for that. It's terror. And fear is the opposite of freedom. Right? And let's not forget, many of the folks shouting the loudest about their freedom are the same ones pushing to ban books, pushing to ban drag shows, criminalize gender-affirming care, force a teenager, sometimes even a child, to carry a pregnancy to term, regardless of the circumstances that landed them there. They chant freedom while passing laws that erase LGBTQ plus identities from classrooms, as if acknowledging someone's existence is a threat. They're screaming about government overreach while cheering on politicians who insert themselves into doctors' offices and bedrooms and private family decisions. They'll tell you it's about protecting children while banning books by queer authors and black authors or anyone who dares to challenge the sanitized version of history they're comfortable with. Let's be clear. This isn't about protecting kids. It's about protecting power and punishing anyone who doesn't conform. You want to talk about don't tread on me? They've turned that slogan into don't tread on me unless I get to tread on you. Because this version of freedom is one directional. It's not freedom for everyone. It's freedom for them. If you don't look like them, you don't love like them, pray like them, vote like them, then your freedom is, suddenly negotiable. That's not liberty. It's authoritarianism in some type of red, white, and blue wrapping paper. And if we don't start calling it what it is, if we keep pretending it's just another political disagreement, we're going to wake up one day and find that freedom's been stripped down to a word on a bumper sticker, sold off to the very people who claim to defend it. This isn't about freedom. It's about control. It's about using the language of liberty to justify the domination of others, whether it's people, land, or labor. Freedom is not the absence of rules. It's the presence of fairness, of dignity, of the ability to live your life without fear that someone else's rights are going to steamroll all over yours. And until we can agree that your freedom should never come at the expense of someone else's humanity, we're going to keep running in circles all round and round and round and round. So the question is, how did we end up here? So divided, so suspicious of one another, so convinced that if the other side wins, our freedoms will vanish. This kind of division we're living in right now, the anger, the suspicion, the fear of the person across the street or across the dinner table is somehow your enemy. This didn't just happen on its own. It was shaped. It was shaped, guys. It was stoked. It's been engineered. Right? So to understand how we ended up with two completely different versions of freedom fighting for airtime, we've got to talk about how that divide was built piece by piece. Right? So let's start with the foundation of the whole mess of everything. It comes down to economic insecurity. Over the last 40 years, wages for working people have barely budged when adjusted for inflation. They're essentially flat, guys. Meanwhile, as we all know, we feel it every day, the cost of everything essential, housing, healthcare, childcare, groceries, gas, has done nothing but climb. You know who's not struggling to keep up? The ultra-wealthy and the billionaires. They're amassing more wealth than ever. Right? While you're figuring out how to pay for insulin or your kid's dental bill, Jeff Bezos was building his fourth yacht. Elon Musk was busy tweeting his way through more tax loopholes and laying off more workers to raise his stock prices. And the Walmart family, they make more in a single day than most families make in a decade, while paying their workers poverty-level wages, right? So that their workers can receive federal benefits, right? That's corporate welfare. This wasn't an accident. It's not just some unfortunate side effect of capitalism. It was by design. Corporate America and the ultra-wealthy have spent decades rewriting the rules, buying off politicians, defunding public programs, and funneling more and more and more money up top, right? They've lobbied to slash taxes for the rich, deregulate industries that make them money, crush the unions, outsource jobs, offshore jobs, privatize healthcare, and make sure campaign finance laws let them buy as many politicians as they need. They've also spent billions pushing propaganda to get hard-working Americans to vote against their best interest. And while all that is happening, we're told to blame each other. Because here's the trick. The billionaire class knew that if the working class Americans, us, black, white, rural, urban, ever realized we all had the same enemy, they knew the game would be over for them. So they gave us enemies to fight instead, right? They gave us immigrants, welfare recipients, the teachers, the coastal elites, anybody from the LGBTQ plus community, somebody who uses a pronoun, people who read too many books, right? The list goes on and on. Trying to divide, so that we will keep fighting each other. Right? You name it, the ultra-wealthy and career politicians are pointing the finger of others to blame so that we don't focus on who is really at fault. Them, they are. Meanwhile, the real grift has been happening right under our noses. They use the language of freedom, right? Free markets, free enterprise, freedom from taxation. But what they really mean is freedom for them to hoard wealth and power without accountability. They mean for them freedom to pollute our air, price us out of our homes, deny us health care, exploit our labor, right? And then run for office or buy the media outlet that tells you it's all somebody else's fault. And you know what? It's worked. It's worked like a charm, right? They've divided us. They've distracted us. And while we've been busy arguing at the kitchen table or online, they've been laughing all the way to the bank, taking more and more money. I mean, did you know that the bottom 50% of households possess only 2.4% of the nation's wealth, while the top 1% hold over 30% of the nation's wealth? This has doubled since 1990. But tell me again how trickle-down economics work. Give me a break. Give me a break. So if you're feeling like the American dream has got snatched out from under you, you're not wrong. It did. It was bought, sold, and gated off so we couldn't get back. And now the people who stole it are trying to sell you the idea that it's somebody else's, some other is the reason your freedom feels out of reach. But the truth is, it's not immigrants or teachers or trans kids or whatever else they want us to hate this week. It's the billionaires. It always has been the billionaires and the corrupt politicians they buy. The ones who broke the system, then told you to hate your neighbor while they cashed the check. So, their idea was to divide and distract, right? The oldest trick in the book. Instead of pointing the finger at the corporations, outsourcing jobs, or the lawmakers rewriting the rules for the wealthy, people were told the problem was their neighbor, right? Your taxes are high because of immigrants. Your kids struggling in school because of diversity. Your paycheck is shrinking because of government handouts, right? All the while, the real con was happening at the top because the ultra-wealthy didn't just benefit from the system, they bought it. I mean, they made it. And they made it to benefit them, not the hardworking American. They've spent decades funneling millions into campaign contributions. It used to be quietly through dark money, PACs, foundations, donor networks, right? Now, since Citizens vs. United, they do it right out in the open. They're not even hiding it anymore. And yet we are still fighting amongst each other, blaming the poor or other marginalized communities. A lot of people coming out and defending the billionaires who put us in this position to begin with. Right? They didn't care if the candidate wore a red tie or a blue one, so long as they could buy him. They would vote for more corporate tax cuts, slash oversight on Wall Street, deregulate the industries that made them rich to begin with. Right? Help them gut programs that help ordinary people build stability. And when tax reform came around, guess who wrote it? Lobbyists wrote it for the ultra-rich. Corporations sent their lawyers to Capitol Hill with entire sections of tax code already written, just waiting to be rubber stamped by the politicians they had already bought. We're not talking about a few clever loopholes here, guys. We're talking about billion-dollar corporations paying zero in federal taxes. Billion-dollar corporations paying zero in federal taxes. We're talking about billionaires who make more in a day than we're earning our entire lifetime, paying a lower effective tax rate than a public school teacher. Because they don't get paid like you and me. They don't collect paychecks. They collect assets, stocks, real estate investments, right? They take cheap money out based on their stock, so they don't have to pay any taxes, right? And even when they do sell, right, they use tax havens, shell companies, or just buy enough politicians to rewrite the rules once again. And this isn't some conspiracy theory, right? It's right on paper. It's the law. You can see it. It's been happening in plain sight. And every time somebody speaks up about it, they're told they're engaging in class warfare, right? But here's the truth. Class warfare has already been happening. We've just been on the losing side of it. So while we were busy being told the problem was our neighbors, the real enemy, right, bought the rule book, rewrote the game, left the rest of us arguing over crumbs, right? And somehow they're still calling that freedom, right? Then came cable news and social media and algorithms that push that. And just like that, we've stopped living in the same reality. You and your cousin could be scrolling through the same app, right? And never once see the same story. Your feed says climate change is a crisis. Theirs says it's a hoax. Yours says healthcare is a human right. Theirs says, hey, wait, that's socialism. And once we stop agreeing on facts, everything else becomes a battle of belief or a battle of disbelief, however you want to look at it, right? We've had the rise of alternative facts, right? It's not some political spin, all right? They're lies, right? Dressed up, repeated, amplified over and over again, right? And when you blast a lie through the right microphone long enough, loud enough, people stop questioning it. They start to believe it. I think we all remember when Trump's advisor coined the phrase on national TV, as if facts are a matter of personal preference. That moment didn't just break the fourth wall, it shattered the whole foundation of trust in public discourse. And it opened up the floodgates for disinformation campaigns to thrive. So, let's talk about something that didn't get nearly enough attention, in my opinion. Said that Fox News had to pay $787 million to Dominion Voting Systems in one of the biggest defamation settlements in U.S. history. Why? Because they knowingly lied to their viewers repeatedly over and over again about the 2020 election. Internal emails show that Fox hosts knew that claims about stolen votes and rigged machines were false. That's why they settled, but they aired them anyway. Why do they air them anyway? Because they know fear sells. Outrage gets ratings. And they were terrified. If they told the truth, their audience would flip the channel, find something even more extreme to watch. It's not journalism, guys. That's propaganda. That's propaganda. They weren't the only ones. OAN, Newsmax. There was an entire universe of the right-wing media follow suit, pushing election lies, conspiracy theories, right? Straight into the living rooms across America. But like I said, it's not just cable news, it's algorithms, right? Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, TikTok, all of them, right? They're not just showing you content, they're shaping your worldview. The more extreme the content, the more emotionally triggering it is. The more likely you are to click, share, and argue about it. And guess what? That's more stuff that algorithm's going to feed you so you can see it more and more. It's not about keeping you engaged. It's about keeping you enraged. It's about training you to see the world a certain way. And, the real kicker is the same platforms can be manipulated by outside actors. We've seen it already. Foreign governments, political operatives, troll farms, right? They flood social media with misinformation, sowing doubt, confusion, and anger. And not by hacking machines, just by hacking our minds, right? We've had entire elections swayed not by ballot fraud, but by information warfare, misinformation warfare, micro-targeted ads, deep fakes, bots. The bots are running amok on social media. I saw 2 bots the other day having a conversation with each other pushing propaganda. It's crazy. Right? You have fake headlines that spread faster than real journalism ever could. And the scary part, people believe what they're being constantly fed, even though it's a lie. So now we don't just live in different media bubbles. We live in different realities, right? One where the election was stolen. One where the pandemic was fake. One where climate change isn't real. But on the other side, where all those same items are existential crisis. And with every scroll, every share, every click, we drift further and further and further apart. So if it feels like we can't talk to each other anymore, like facts don't matter, and truth has become optional, it's because in many ways it has, right? If we don't find our way back to shared truth, then real freedom won't be possible. Because without truth, freedom is just a word we shout at each other, right? While everything else just kind of burns down around. And of course, it's not just the media, right? Billionaires keep us divided, right? So let's talk a little about politicians on both sides of the aisle who've turned fear into a business model. Because if you think only one party is guilty of manipulating outrage to win elections and raise money, You're not seeing the full picture. All right? Republicans have mastered the art of cultural panic. They tell their base that Democrats want to destroy America. All right? That immigrants are invading. Drag queens are grooming kids, and woke liberals are trying to erase their way of life. Right? They use fear to change. Right? Fear to change racial culture, generational, to keep people locked in a constant state of anxiety. Right? And then while everyone's yelling about CRT or transgender bathrooms, they quietly push through more mega tax breaks for the wealthy. They've got environmental regulations that pollute the very groundwater where they live and deregulate Wall Street so that more money can filter up top. But let's not pretend Democrats are above the game. They've raised millions warning that democracy will die if the other side wins, and then turn around and water down legislation and protect corporate donors and ignore the working class. Right? Between election cycles. They campaign on fighting for the people, but once elected, many protect the same wealthy and the lobbyist agendas, they claim to oppose. And when outrage works, they lean on it. Right? Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes alarm bells are real. We have some real stuff going on right now. But it's been stoked, right? It's been flamed. When everything's an emergency, nothing gets solved. As long as politicians are taking corporate money, nothing will ever be solved because both sides are bought and paid for. Right? The strategy is the same. Keep you mad, keep you hooked, because when you're mad, right, you tune in. You show up. You write that check, right? You donate that money. And that's what both parties count on. Not unity, not understanding, not progress. They count on rage. Because rage is a shortcut. It gets attention. It drives polls. And it keeps us from turning that anger upward where it belongs. Instead of holding the powerful accountable, we're arguing over tweets and TikToks while they pass crazy military budgets, ignore corporate monopolies that are taking advantage of hardworking Americans, and they protect billionaires from paying their fair share. Meanwhile, they're gutting social programs that actually work. And the most dangerous part, they make us believe that our neighbors are the threat. When the real problem, the real power brokers are the ones smiling behind closed doors while we're fighting in the streets over pennies. So yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around for both sides. The right stokes the fear of culture, the left stokes the fear of collapse. Both sides rake in donations while working Americans keep losing ground. If freedom is supposed to mean something in this country, then we've got to stop letting politicians and billionaires define what freedom is for us. Because they're not interested in your freedom. They're interested in your obedience. And at the end of the day, we don't just have a political divide. We have a trust crisis. People don't trust the media. They don't trust each other. They don't trust science. We don't trust elections. We don't trust the schools. We don't trust the government. And once trust erodes, it's hard to build anything lasting. We know that. So here we are. Everyone claiming to fight for freedom, but half the country feels like they're losing it. And well, the other half feels like they never had it in the first place. Because if freedom is being weaponized to divide us, don't you think it's time we reclaim it? We need to reclaim freedom together. Both sides, left, right, far, out, everybody, right? If we could all just see behind the curtain and how the ruling class is manipulating all of us to fight each other, then maybe we could come together and make real change, right? What does real freedom actually look like? How do we build it together? Because if we learned anything in this episode, it's that freedom has been twisted again. Marketed, sold, and weaponized. Used to justify war. Used to justify pollution. Used to justify taking away people's due process. Used to justify inequality. Used to justify hate. Used to justify control. That's not real freedom. Real freedom isn't zero regulation, isn't tax cuts for billionaires, and the sure the hell isn't telling people who they can be or how they can live or what they can do with their own lives and their own body. Right? Real freedom looks like the freedom to live without fear, whether you're walking down the street in your own skin, praying in peace, or sending your kid to school. right? Freedom to access healthcare when you need it, not just when you can afford it. We got to be able to have the freedom to have healthcare. Freedom to love who you love, marry who you choose, raise a family without hiding who you are. The freedom to raise your family and have your beliefs for you. The freedom to earn fair wages, to work hard, and know that you have food, housing, and dignity on the other side of that hard work. All right? We have the freedom to breathe clean air, drink safe water, because no one's freedom should come at the cost of someone else's health. We should have the freedom to learn history and learn it honestly, not sanitized to comfort the powerful or the people that are uncomfortable with our true history. The freedom to vote without jumping through hoops, right? As a citizen in your own country. The freedom to exist without being legislated out of public life. And the real freedom is not about me, it's about we. Because freedom is a shared project. Your freedom ends where someone else's begins. It's not about doing whatever you want without consequences. It's about building a society where everyone has the chance to live fully, safely, and freely. And that's going to take more than just slogans, right? It's going to take accountability, empathy, truth-telling, policy that serves people, not profits. And maybe most of all, it's going to take unlearning the lie that freedom means I got mine, screw everyone else. Because that lie has cost us too much already. So we got to stop letting billionaires, corporate lobbyists, and opportunistic politicians define what freedom means, right? We need to reclaim it, right? We need to make freedom something that we can feel in our bones, not just hear in a campaign ad. Got to make it real for everyone, right? It's a promise that we got to keep. And if we're going to say freedom for all in this country, we better start acting like we mean it. We have to have freedom for all. I want to thank you for spending time with me today. As always, if this, has resonated with you, I ask you to share, leave a comment, talk about it, bring it up. Once again, until next time, I'm Ben Chrisley. This is Evergreen Perspective. Stay fired up, stay engaged. Most of all, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Let freedom ring.